"I'll never marry a slave," but when he carries her dying father, everything changes. A proud planter's daughter speaks her vow at the engagement table while thunder rolls outside. Then strong hands lift her father from the muddy yard, gentle as church deacons with the dying. But a sharp-eyed child sees what others miss, a crescent scar that matches silver hidden in the attic trunk. The overseer's papers crackle with fresh ink and wrong-colored wax. A family Bible holds secrets written in Latin margins. Storm winds howl as lanterns signal through the darkness, guiding 3 souls toward the courthouse steps where truth waits like justice on horseback. When the county clerk opens his ledger and the crowd presses close, when the forged documents crumble and the real covenant is read aloud, will a daughter's bitter vow become the very words that set them all free? Steam from the scalding kettle curled up toward the kitchen rafters. Dawnlight slanted through window glass thick with morning frost. Eliza Harrow smoothed her grey wool dress and tried to look pleased about the engagement supper her father had arranged. The kitchen smelled of coffee grounds and bacon grease. Mrs. Whitman from the neighboring plantation leaned forward on her wooden stool, eyes bright with gossip. "Course, everyone knows about the debts. Sugar prices ain't been right for 3 seasons now." Eliza's cheeks burned. Father had invited the Whitmans to announce her engagement to Overseer Pike. He said it would steady the neighbors' confidence in the Harrow name. But sitting here with flour dust settling on her sleeves, listening to whispers about money trouble, she felt more like goods at auction than a bride-to-be. Pike sat across the table, thick fingers wrapped around his tin cup. His beard held crumbs from the cornbread. "Miss Eliza knows her duty. Don't you, darling?" The word "darling" tasted like ash in the air. Eliza nodded because father expected it, because the mortgage papers sat in his desk drawer like sleeping snakes, because Pike promised to clear the debts if she said yes. "Of course she does," said Mrs. Whitman, patting Eliza's hand. "Smart girl. Though I suppose some folks might wonder about all these new hands your father's been buying. Times being what they are." Young Ruth sat in the corner on a 3-legged stool, polishing the good spoons with a rag. She was barely 8, with dark eyes that seemed to catch every word. The child had a gift for keeping still and listening. Sometimes Eliza caught her humming hymns under her breath, always in perfect pitch. Pike cleared his throat. "Speaking of new hands, I got the bill of sale for that field worker, Isaac, big fellow from the Beaumont place. Paid good money for him, and he's mine to command now." His voice held a sharp edge. "Some slaves get ideas above their station, thinking they're better than their lot." Eliza's stomach twisted. She had seen Isaac twice since father bought him. Once, splitting firewood with steady, measured strokes. Once, helping old Ben with the mules. He moved with quiet dignity that made her think of church deacons, not field hands. "Mrs. Whitman clicked her tongue. "Well, I suppose some folks might get the wrong notions, especially if they're not reminded of their place proper-like." The gossip hung in the air like smoke. Eliza felt all their eyes on her, Pike's especially. He wanted her to say something, to prove she understood her station and theirs. The words came out harder than she meant them to. "I'll never marry a slave." The kitchen went still. Even Ruth's polishing stopped. Pike's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's my girl," he said. "Knows the natural order of things." Rain started pattering on the roof. Through the window, Eliza could see the yard turning muddy. Lightning flickered far off, followed by low thunder. Then the kitchen door opened. Isaac stepped inside, rain dark and steady. Water dripped from his brown coat onto the scrubbed floorboards. In his arms, he carried father like a sleeping child. Mr. Harrow's face was grey as old paper. His breathing came in shallow gasps. His eyes rolled white, showing no recognition of the room or the people in it. "Found him by the stable," Isaac said, voice calm despite the urgency. "Collapsed hard. Needs the doctor." Eliza shot to her feet, the stool scraping behind her. "Father!" Isaac lowered Mr. Harrow onto the flour-dusted table with care that made Eliza's throat tighten. His hands were large but gentle, steady. When he stepped back, she saw rain had plastered his shirt to his shoulders. Steam rose from the wet cloth like morning mist. "Ruth," Isaac said quietly, "you're humming, like you do for the horses when they're spooked." Ruth's clear voice rose soft as birdsong, a hymn about still waters. The kitchen hounds, who had been pacing and whining, settled on the floorboards with sighs. Pike stood up fast, his chair scraping loud. "Now see here, you don't give orders in this house." Isaac didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on Mr. Harrow's grey face. "Man needs a doctor. Storm's getting worse." "I'll fetch Dr. Whitlow," said Ben from the doorway. The old stable hand's coat dripped rain. Mules saddled. "Missus." Whitman pressed herself against the wall, fan fluttering. "Merciful heavens. Should I ride for the preacher too?" "Just the doctor," Eliza said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Hurry, Ben." Thunder rolled closer. Isaac moved to the hearth and began banking the fire higher. Not asked, not commanded. He simply saw what needed doing, and did it. Pike's face darkened. "I said you don't give orders here." "No orders given," Isaac replied, still tending the flames. "Just warming the room for a sick man." Eliza found herself watching Isaac's hands as he fed kindling to the fire. They were scarred from field work, but sure in their movements. On his left wrist, she glimpsed a mark, old and faded, but clear in the firelight. Shaped like a crescent moon, Ruth saw it too, the child's dark eyes fixed on Isaac's wrist with the same careful attention she gave to polishing silver. Father's breathing rattled in the sudden quiet. Eliza knelt beside the table and took his cold hand. "Father, can you hear me?" Mr. Harrow's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved soundlessly. "He's burning with fever," said Hester from the stove. The cook had been silent through the whole engagement business, but now her voice carried authority. "Need willow bark tea, and someone to sit with him proper." Isaac straightened from the fire. "I'll stay if you need help moving him." Pike stepped forward. "You'll get back to your quarters where you belong. Storm's getting worse," Isaac said mildly. "Man collapsed once already, might need carrying again." It was practical sense, nothing more. But the way he spoke, calm, reasonable, unafraid, made Pike's face flush red as the fire coals. "I'll stay with Father," Eliza said quickly. "Until the doctor comes." Isaac nodded and moved toward the door. As he passed the table where Father lay, he paused. His scarred hand almost touched Mr. Harrow's forehead, then stopped. Instead, he looked at Eliza. "Storm should break by morning," he said. "Always does." Then he was gone into the rain, leaving only wet footprints and the smell of wet wool. Pike slammed his cup down on the table. "There, you see? Getting ideas above his station, just like I said." But Eliza wasn't listening. She was thinking about the careful way Isaac had carried Father, the gentle way he'd placed him on the table, the quiet certainty in his voice when he said the storm would break. And she was thinking about her words, spoken loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll never marry a slave." The words felt different now, heavier, like stones she'd thrown without thinking about where they might land. Ruth stood up from her stool, spoons gleaming in her small hands. "Miss Eliza, should I fetch blankets?" "Your father's shivering." "Yes." From the linen chest upstairs. Ruth curtsied and slipped out of the kitchen, quiet as smoke. Eliza heard her bare feet on the stair steps, padding soft toward the upper rooms. Dr. Whitlow arrived an hour later, coat streaming rain. He checked Father's pulse and breathing, then mixed powders in a tin cup. While he worked, he muttered notes in Latin under his breath, something about fever and heart strain. Ruth returned with blankets and settled back on her stool. Eliza noticed the child's lips moving silently, as if repeating words she'd heard. Ruth had that gift, remembering everything exactly as it was spoken. "Your father needs rest," Dr. Whitlow said, closing his leather bag. "And time. Fever should break in a day or two. If it doesn't." He didn't finish the sentence. Pike walked the doctor to the door. Their voices carried from the porch, talk of debts and deadlines, and what might happen to the property if Mr. Harrow didn't recover quick enough to sign papers. Eliza pulled a blanket up to Father's chin. His breathing was still rough, but steadier than before. The willow bark tea had helped. Through the window, she could see Isaac crossing the yard toward the quarters. Lightning lit him for a moment, tall and straight despite the driving rain. When he reached the cabins, she saw other figures waiting, hands who'd been watching from doorways, worried about their master's collapse. Isaac spoke to them, briefly. Whatever he said, their shoulders relaxed. Some nodded and went back inside. Others lingered, still concerned, but no longer panicked. The sight made something twist in Eliza's chest. Isaac was calming fears, settling nerves, leading, in his quiet way, without making a show of it. Ruth began humming again, the same hymn as before, about still waters and green pastures. The kitchen hounds lifted their heads, then settled deeper into sleep. "Child's got a gift for calming things," Hester murmured, stirring the soup pot. Voice like that, she could lead a choir. "She's just humming," Pike said, coming back from the porch. But his voice sounded uneasy. Eliza looked at Ruth's small face, serene in concentration. The child was doing more than humming. She was listening, watching, remembering every detail of this strange night. Thunder rolled away toward the east. The storm was moving on, just as Isaac had said it would. Father stirred on the makeshift bed. His eyes opened, cloudy but aware. "Eliza?" "I'm here, Father. The man who carried me. Isaac. Good hands. Gentle." His voice was barely a whisper. "Where did he come from?" Pike answered before Eliza could speak. "Beaumont Place. Bought him fair and square. Got the papers to prove it." Father's eyes closed again. "Beaumont Place," he murmured. "Long way from here." Ruth's humming stopped. She looked up from her spoons with those dark, careful eyes. "Miss Eliza," she said softly, "should I put these spoons away now?" "Yes, child, in the good chest." Ruth gathered the polished silver and padded toward the stairs. But at the doorway, she paused. "The man Isaac," she said. "He has kind hands. Like the preacher when he blesses the babies." Pike snorted. "Child talks nonsense." But Eliza knew Ruth didn't speak without thinking. The child saw things others missed, remembered things others forgot, and she had noticed Isaac's hands, just as Eliza had. The kitchen fell quiet except for the fire's crackling and Father's rough breathing. Outside, rain gentled to a steady patter on the roof. Eliza pulled her shawl tighter and settled in to watch through the night. But her mind kept drifting to the man who had carried her father like precious cargo. The man with the crescent scar on his wrist and eyes that held no fear. The man she had sworn, in front of witnesses, never to marry. The words echoed in her head as lightning flickered one last time and moved on, toward distant hills. Ruth climbed the narrow stairs to the upper hall, the polished spoons bright in her small hands. The house felt different in the stormlight. Shadows moved strange across the walls. She passed the master's room, then Miss Eliza's. At the end of the hall stood the door to the storage attic. It was usually locked, but tonight the latch hung loose. Ruth pushed the door open and stepped inside. Moonlight slanted through the single window, turning dust motes into tiny dancers. Old trunks lined the walls, their brass corners gleaming. Quilts lay folded on wooden shelves. The air smelled of lavender and old wood. Ruth moved to the linen chest and opened the heavy lid. Inside, sheets and pillowcases lay crisp and white. She placed the spoons in their felt-lined box and was about to close the lid when something caught her eye. A smaller trunk sat beside the linen chest. Its top lay slightly open, revealing treasures inside. Ruth's curiosity pulled her forward. She lifted the lid with careful hands. Inside lay objects from Miss Eliza's childhood. A china doll with painted blue eyes, a book of pressed flowers, and nested in a corner, wrapped in soft cloth, a silver locket. Ruth picked up the locket and held it to the moonlight. The silver was tarnished, but beautiful. On the front, someone had etched tiny flowers and vines, but when she turned it over, her breath caught. On the back, clear as morning, was carved a small crest, a shield topped with a crown, and inside the shield, a crescent moon surrounded by 3 stars. Ruth's memory fixed on every detail: the curve of the crescent, the 5 pointed stars, the delicate linework around the shield's border. She had seen this shape before, tonight, on Isaac's wrist. The scar on his left arm had been the same crescent moon, faded and old, but unmistakable in the firelight. Ruth carefully wrapped the locket and placed it back in the trunk. Her heart beat quick as a bird's wing. Her perfect memory held both images now, the carved crest and the scarred crescent, side by side in her mind. Thunder rumbled far away. The storm was leaving, just as Isaac had promised. But Ruth sensed something larger approaching, some truth hidden in crescent moons and silver lockets, some connection that adults couldn't see but a child might remember. She closed the trunk and gathered blankets for Miss Eliza. Downstairs, Father Harrow still needed tending, but now Ruth carried more than blankets down those creaking steps. She carried a secret that might change everything. Steam from the scalding kettle curled around Isaac's shoulders as he lowered Mr. Harrow onto a flour-dusted table. And in the corner, little Ruth began to sing. The night stretched long. Eliza sat beside her father's makeshift bed, listening to his labored breathing and the rain's gentle drum on the roof. Pike had finally gone home when the storm eased, muttering about business to finish and papers to review. "Get some rest," Dr. Whitlow had said before leaving. "Fever should break by morning. If it doesn't, send for me quick." Hester dozed in her chair by the fire. Ruth curled on her stool like a sleeping cat, the blankets draped over her small form. The house settled into the deep quiet of small hours. But Eliza couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Isaac's face in the firelight, calm and certain, unafraid of Pike's bluster or the storm's fury, and she heard her own voice, sharp with pride. "I'll never marry a slave." The words felt like a chain now, binding her to Pike's rough hands and harder heart, binding her to a future that sat heavy as winter on her chest. Father stirred and mumbled in his fever sleep. Eliza touched his forehead, still burning hot. She dipped a cloth in cool water and laid it across his brow. "Mercy," he whispered, eyes still closed. Always mercy. It was something he'd said often when she was small, when she'd been cruel to the barn cats or sharp-tongued with the house servants. "Remember mercy, Eliza. The good book says the merciful will find mercy." She hadn't thought of those words in years, not since Mother died and Father began talking more about property values than kindness. Not since the debts started piling up like winter snow. But tonight, with her father weak as a broken bird and Isaac's gentle hands still vivid in her memory, the old words stirred something in her chest. Ruth shifted on her stool and began humming in her sleep. The same hymn as before, but softer now. A lullaby that seemed to ease Father's breathing. Eliza found herself watching the child's peaceful face. Ruth had a gift for seeing things others missed, for remembering details that seemed small but weren't, like the way she'd noticed Isaac's hands and asked him to hum for the frightened hounds, like the careful way she'd looked at Isaac's wrist when the firelight caught his scars. Ruth's eyes opened suddenly, catching Eliza's gaze. "Miss Eliza, your father's fever's turning. Can you feel it?" Eliza pressed her palm to Father's forehead. The burning heat was less than before, not gone, but gentler. "How did you know?" Ruth sat up, blankets pooling around her shoulders. His breathing changed, got steadier, like when a storm's moving off. It was true. Father's chest rose and fell more evenly now. The grey color was leaving his cheeks. "Storm's breaking," Ruth said, looking toward the window. Just like Isaac said it would. Dawn light was creeping through the glass, pale and clean. The rain had stopped completely. Birds began their morning songs in the oak trees. Eliza felt something loosen in her chest. Father would recover. The crisis was passing, but other troubles remained. Pike would be back with his papers and his demands. The debts still waited like hungry wolves. And her own words still hung in the air. "I'll never marry a slave." Ruth slipped down from her stool and moved to the window. Outside, figures were emerging from the quarters. Field hands starting their morning chores despite the short night. Isaac walked among them, checking on storm damage. A tree had fallen near the tobacco barn. He organized a crew to clear it, pointing and gesturing until everyone understood their part. "He leads them," Ruth said softly, like he was born to it. Eliza joined her at the window. Isaac was showing two younger men how to cut the fallen branches safely. His movements were sure, his voice calm even from a distance. "Slaves don't lead," Eliza said, but the words sounded hollow. Ruth looked up at her with those dark, knowing eyes. "Then what's he doing?" Before Eliza could answer, Father called her name. His voice was stronger now, clearer. "Eliza, come here, child." She knelt beside the table. Father's eyes were focused now, aware. "The man Isaac. Where did Pike say he came from?" "Beaumont Place. Pike bought him when they sold off their hands." Father frowned. "Beaumont Place. That's strange. Why?" "Old Marcus Beaumont and I had dealings years ago, before you were born. He never sold his people, said it was against his principles." Father's voice grew thoughtful. "Always kept careful records, too. Every birth, every death, every paper properly witnessed." He tried to sit up, but weakness pushed him back down. "Pike showed you the bill of sale?" "He mentioned it, said he had all the proper documents." Father's frown deepened. "I'd like to see those papers, when I'm stronger." "Something doesn't sit right." Hester stirred by the fire and stretched her arms. "Morning comes early on a farm. Even after storm nights." She began preparing breakfast, coffee and corn cakes and ham slices, the kitchen filled with familiar smells and sounds, normal morning rhythms resuming after the strange night. But Ruth remained at the window, watching Isaac direct the cleanup work. Her small face was serious with thought. "Miss Eliza," she said quietly, "that scar on Isaac's wrist, the crescent moon shape, I've seen that mark before." "Where?" Ruth glanced around the kitchen. Hester was busy at the stove, humming under her breath. Father had drifted back to healing sleep. "Upstairs, in your mama's things. There's a locket with the same mark carved on the back." Eliza's breath caught. "My mother's locket? The one with the flowers?" "Yes, Sam. Same crescent moon, same stars around it, exactly the same." The words hit Eliza like cold water. Her mother's locket had been a family heirloom, passed down through generations. The crest on the back was the old Harrow coat of arms, from before they came to America. If Isaac carried the same mark. "Ruth, are you certain? The marks looked exactly the same?" "Yes. I remember everything exactly as it is." It was true. Ruth's memory was perfect for details. She never forgot faces or voices or patterns once she'd seen them. But what did it mean? How could an enslaved man carry the Harrow family crest, scarred into his very skin? "Miss Eliza?" Ruth's voice was barely a whisper. "Should I fetch the locket? So you can see?" Before Eliza could answer, hoofbeats echoed in the yard. Through the window, she saw Pike riding up the muddy path. His face was set hard, and he carried a leather satchel under his arm. "He's got papers with him," Ruth observed. Pike dismounted and tied his horse to the porch rail. His boots struck heavy on the wooden steps. "Miss Eliza," he called through the door. "Time we finished our business from last night." Eliza's stomach clenched. The engagement, the promises made before witnesses, the future that waited like a trap. But her mind was spinning with new questions, about crescent moons and family crests, about bills of sale that might not tell the whole truth, about gentle hands and quiet dignity that didn't fit the chains meant to bind them. "I need to see that locket," she whispered to Ruth. "Can you fetch it without anyone noticing?" Ruth nodded and slipped toward the stairs like a shadow. Pike's knuckles rapped the kitchen door. "Eliza, your father better?" "Good. We got papers to sign." Father stirred at the noise but didn't wake. His breathing was peaceful now, the fever truly broken. Eliza smoothed her skirts and walked to the door. Her hand trembled on the latch. Outside, the morning sun painted everything gold. The storm had washed the air clean, and birds sang in the dripping trees. But inside her chest, a different kind of storm was building. One that might change everything she thought she knew about Isaac, about her family, about the promises that bound them all. Thunder rolled in the distance as Ruth's fingers closed over the locket's cool oval, and the truth began its long journey toward the light. Pike's leather satchel slapped against the kitchen table like a judge's gavel. Inside the bag, papers rustled with the promise of binding words and legal chains. "Your father looks better," Pike said, though his eyes barely glanced at Mr. Harrow's sleeping form. "Good. We'll need his signature on these documents." Eliza kept her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. "Perhaps we should wait until he's fully recovered. Time's a luxury we don't have, darling." Pike's voice carried an edge sharp as winter. "Creditors don't wait for convenient moments, and there's been talk." "What kind of talk?" Pike pulled out a chair and sat without being invited. His bulk made the wooden seat creak. "Neighbors asking questions about your father's health, about the debts, about whether this plantation can meet its obligations." He opened the satchel and spread papers across the table. Bills of sale, mortgage documents, marriage contracts written in precise legal script. "These papers settle everything," Pike continued. "Your hand in marriage secures the debt relief. The plantation stays in family hands. Everyone wins." Eliza stared at the documents. Her name appeared again and again in careful ink. Eliza Harrow, spinster daughter. Eliza Harrow, lawful bride. Each instance felt like a nail in a coffin lid. Through the window, she could see Isaac working with the storm cleanup crew. He lifted fallen branches with easy strength, stacking them clear of the walking paths. When young Samuel stumbled under a heavy load, Isaac steadied him with patient hands. "There's something else," Pike said, following her gaze. "That field hand, Isaac. I've had reports about his behavior." "What kind of reports?" "Acting above his station, giving orders to other slaves, making them think he's some kind of leader instead of property." Pike's voice hardened. "That kind of thinking spreads like fever. Can't have it on a well-run plantation." He pulled another paper from the satchel. This one was older, yellowed at the edges. A bill of sale with official seals and ribbon. Brought his ownership papers. Bought him fair and square from the Beaumont estate. Paid top dollar too. Pike smoothed the document with thick fingers. Man's mind to command. Time, he learned, proper respect. Eliza studied the paper without seeming to. The writing was formal, full of legal phrases about chattel property and binding ownership. At the bottom, red wax held an official seal, but something about the document felt wrong, though she couldn't name what. "Seems like a lot of trouble for one field hand," she said carefully. Pike's eyes flicked to hers. Trouble starts small. One slave thinking he's equal to his betters. Next thing you know, they're all getting ideas, running off, causing uprisings. The word uprisings hung in the air like smoke. It was every planter's nightmare, the moment when property decided it was human instead. Father stirred on his makeshift bed, his eyes opened, still cloudy but aware. "Pike? What brings you here so early?" "Business, sir. Papers that need signing while the ink's still wet." Father tried to sit up. Eliza moved to help him, stuffing pillows behind his back. "What papers?" "Marriage contract, debt relief, security for the plantation." Pike's voice took on a wheeling tone. "Everything we discussed before your spell last night." Father's gaze moved to the document spread across the table. His eyes were clearer now, but still weak from fever. "Eliza, do you consent to this marriage?" The question hung heavy as storm clouds. Pike's eyes burned into her face. The papers waited for her signature like hungry mouths. She stopped, hearing her own voice from the night before. "I'll never marry a slave." But those words felt different now, smaller, like stones thrown in pride that had landed somewhere she never intended. Before she could answer, footsteps whispered on the stairs. Ruth appeared in the doorway, her small hands empty but her eyes bright with purpose. "Miss Eliza, your father's tea is ready." "The willow bark kind Dr. Whitlow ordered." It was a rescue, cleverly disguised as service. Ruth had bought, her time to think. "Thank you, Ruth. Help me give it to him." Pike's jaw tightened. Business first, tea after. But father was already reaching for the cup. "Always did prefer willow bark to lawyer's ink," he said with a weak smile. "Tastes bitter, but it's honest about what it is." While father sipped his tea, Ruth moved quietly around the kitchen. She straightened chairs, wiped surfaces, gathered scattered items. But Eliza noticed how the child's eyes lingered on Pike's documents, how her head tilted slightly, as if memorizing what she saw. Ruth had perfect recall for details. If there was something wrong with those papers, she might be the one to spot it. Pike drummed his fingers on the table. "Time's wasting, Mr. Harrow. Markets don't wait for sick men to feel better." Father set down his teacup. His color was better, but his hands still shook slightly. "Show me the debt papers first. Want to see exactly what we're settling." Pike shuffled through his documents and produced a ledger sheet covered in numbers, interest calculations, principal amounts, due dates that had already passed. Father studied the figures, his mouth drawing into a thin line. "These numbers are higher than I remember. Interest compounds daily, plus penalties for late payment. Some of these charges are new." Pike shrugged. "Cost of doing business in uncertain times." Eliza watched her father's face grow gray again. Not from fever this time, but from the weight of impossible debt, numbers that could never be paid with tobacco crops and cotton harvests. Through the window, Isaac had moved closer to the house. He was directing 2 men to shore up a loose shutter that the storm had damaged. His movements were efficient, purposeful. The other workers followed his lead without question. Pike noticed too. "There, you see? Acting like he owns the place instead of being owned by it." "He's fixing storm damage," Father said mildly. "Seems like useful work. It's the way he does it, like he's giving orders instead of taking them." Pike's voice carried real anger now. That kind of behavior corrupts other slaves, makes them think they're something they're not. Ruth looked up from her cleaning. What are they, Mr. Pike? The question came soft and innocent, but it cut through the kitchen like a blade. Pike stared at the child. They're property, tools for working land and making profit, nothing more. Then why do they have names? Ruth asked. Tools don't usually have names. Ruth, Eliza warned, but part of her wanted to hear the answer. Pike's face flushed red. Child's got a smart mouth, needs correction. She asked a fair question, Father said. His voice was stronger now, more like himself. Tools don't have names, or sing hymns, or carry sick men with gentle hands. The kitchen fell quiet except for the fire's crackling. Outside, Isaac's crew had moved on to clearing debris from the vegetable garden. Their voices drifted through the window, easy conversation, shared laughter. Pike pulled the marriage contract toward Father's side of the table. We're getting off the subject. These papers need signatures today. Father picked up the document and began reading. His eyes moved slowly across the legal language, pausing at certain phrases. This gives you ownership of the plantation if I die. Temporary guardianship until your daughter comes of age. Eliza's 22. She's already of age. Pike shifted in his chair. Well, until she has a son then, someone to carry on the family name. Father's eyes sharpened, despite his weakness. And if there's no son, then the property transfers to her husband, for proper management. The words sat heavy in the air. Eliza felt them like chains wrapping around her chest. Marriage to Pike wouldn't just bind her body, it would steal her inheritance too. Father set the papers down. I need time to consider these terms. Time we don't have. Pike slammed his palm on the table, making the teacups jump. Creditors are circling like buzzards. Wait too long, they'll take everything anyway. Ruth had moved to the window. She stood very still, looking out at Isaac and his work crew. Miss Eliza, she said suddenly, can you come see this? Eliza rose and joined Ruth at the window. Outside, Isaac was kneeling beside the fallen tree, examining something in the exposed roots. What is it, Ruth? The way he's looking at that tree, like he's reading something in the wood grain. Ruth's voice was puzzled. My daddy could read trees that way. Said the rings told stories about dry years and wet ones. Eliza watched Isaac trace patterns in the tree's exposed rings with his finger. His expression was thoughtful, concentrated, like a man solving a puzzle. Your daddy was a smart man, Eliza said gently. Ruth's father had died 2 winters ago, taken by lung fever. Yes, he could read tree rings and star patterns and... Ruth paused, her young face serious. And he could read writing too. Latin writing, like in the big Bible. Eliza's breath caught. Your father could read Latin? Yes, used to practice with the Bible when Master was away. Said learning was food for the soul, even if it had to be stolen food. The words hit Eliza like lightning. Ruth's father had been literate, not just in English, but in Latin too. And if he'd taught Ruth even a little, Ruth, can you read? Any words at all? The child glanced nervously toward Pike, who was still arguing with Father about contract terms. Some words, Ruth whispered. Daddy taught me before he died, said it might be useful someday. Eliza's heart began beating faster. If Ruth could read, even a little, she might be able to help decode the mysteries that were piling up. The questions about Isaac's origins, the doubts about Pike's documents. Pike's voice rose sharply. Enough delays. These papers get signed today, or I withdraw my offer. See how you like dealing with the creditors. Then, Father's jaw set stubborn, a man has the right to read what he's signing. You've read it. Debt relief in exchange for your daughter's hand. Simple as that. But nothing about Pike felt simple anymore. His eagerness to rush the signing, his anger at Isaac's natural leadership, his talk of uprisings and proper respect. Ruth tugged Eliza's sleeve. Miss Eliza, there's something else. About the tree roots. What about them? The way they're twisted. Like they grew around something that was buried there. Something metal, maybe. Isaac's looking at it like he recognizes the shape. Eliza peered closer. Isaac was indeed studying something among the roots, something that glinted dully in the morning sun. As she watched, he worked his fingers into the earth and pulled out a small object. Even from the window, she could see it was metal, old and tarnished. Isaac examined the object for a moment, then slipped it into his pocket, but not before Ruth's sharp eyes caught its shape. "A ring," Ruth whispered. "Old one, with something carved on top." Before Eliza could respond, Pike's chair scraped back from the table. "Where are you going?" Father asked. "To settle that Isaac problem once and for all." Time, he learned, proper respect. Pike's hand moved to his belt, where he carried a leather strap for disciplining slaves. Eliza's stomach twisted. Surely that's not necessary. He's only doing repair work. He's getting ideas above his station. And ideas spread like plague if they're not stopped quick. Pike strode toward the door, his boots heavy on the floorboards. Through the window, Eliza could see Isaac still kneeling by the tree, unaware of the approaching storm. Father tried to rise from his bed. "Pike, wait. Man's done nothing wrong." But Pike was already through the door, his strap uncoiled and ready. Ruth pressed close to the window. "Miss Eliza, we have to stop him." "How?" "He's the overseer. He has the right to discipline field hands." "Does he?" Ruth's dark eyes were bright with sudden purpose. "What if Isaac isn't really a field hand? What if those papers are wrong?" Before Eliza could ask what she meant, Ruth darted toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" "To fetch something." "Something that might help." Ruth disappeared up the steps, her bare feet silent as smoke. Through the window, Eliza watched Pike approach Isaac with the strap raised. Isaac looked up calmly, showing no fear. He said something that made Pike stop and point angrily at the house. Then Isaac stood, brushing dirt from his knees. He was taller than Pike, broader through the shoulders. When he spoke again, his voice carried clearly through the window. "Storm damage needs fixing. Work won't wait for arguments." Pike's face turned purple with rage. The strap whistled through the air, but Isaac caught it mid-swing, his scarred hand closing around the leather. For a moment, the two men stood frozen in a tableau of power and resistance. Then, Ruth's voice rang out from the kitchen doorway, clear and strong as church bells. "Mr. Pike, Miss Eliza needs you inside right quick." Something about those papers. It was a lie, told with perfect innocence, but it worked. Pike released the strap and turned toward the house, his face still dark with anger. Isaac let the leather fall and returned to his work as if nothing had happened. Ruth slipped back into the kitchen, slightly breathless. In her small hands, she carried a wrapped bundle. "What did you fetch?" Eliza whispered. "Your mama's locket, and something else." Ruth's voice was bright with excitement. "Something from the Bible that might change everything." Pike stamped back through the door, anger rolling off him like heat from a forge. "What's so urgent it can't wait?" Eliza's mind raced. Ruth had saved Isaac from a beating with her quick thinking. Now she had to keep the deception going. "I wanted to ask about the marriage settlement, the part about property inheritance." It wasn't entirely a lie. She did want to understand those terms better. Pike's anger cooled slightly. "What about it? If something happened to me, what becomes of the plantation?" "Reverts to your husband, naturally. That's law. Even if there are other family claims, other heirs." Pike's eyes narrowed. "What heirs? Your father has no sons." "No," Eliza said carefully, "but families sometimes have complicated histories, old obligations, forgotten promises." Father looked up from his pillows with sudden interest. "What kind of promises, daughter?" Ruth stepped forward, her bundle clutched tight. "Miss Eliza, should I show them what I found?" "Show us what?" Pike demanded. Ruth unwrapped the cloth. Inside lay Eliza's mother's silver locket, still tarnished but gleaming in the morning light. And beneath it, a small leather-bound book. "Your mama's prayer book," Ruth said to Eliza, "from the trunk upstairs, with writing in the margins." Father's face went white. "Catherine's prayer book? I thought it was lost years ago." "No, sir. It was with her other things. And there's something written inside. Something in Latin." Pike grabbed the book before anyone could stop him. He flipped through the pages, frowning at the Latin text. "Can't read a word of this foreign nonsense." "I can read some," Ruth said quietly. "My daddy taught me. And there's a note in the margin about promises and obligations." She pointed to a page near the back. In faded ink, someone had written a note in careful Latin script. "What does it say?" Father asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ruth's young voice was steady as she translated, "A promise sealed with blood and witnessed by law." The firstborn son shall be free on his 25th birthday, bearing the mark of the crescent moon. The kitchen fell silent as death. Pike's face had gone grey as ash. "What does it mean?" Eliza asked, though her heart already knew. Father was staring at the prayer book with wide eyes. "Your mother wrote that, before you were born. It was part of an old family obligation, a debt of honor." "What kind of debt?" "A life saved, a promise made, a covenant sealed in blood and sworn before God." Pike slammed the book shut. "Ancient nonsense. Has nothing to do with current business." But his hands shook as he set the book down, and Eliza noticed how his eyes avoided the silver locket with its carved crest, the same crest that matched the scar on Isaac's wrist. Thunder rumbled in the distance as if another storm was building. But this one would break not with rain and wind, but with truth, long buried in family Bibles and forgotten promises. Ruth's perfect memory had found the first thread. Now they had to follow it wherever it led, even if it unraveled everything they thought they knew about chains and freedom, ownership and family, promises and the price of keeping them. Outside, Isaac worked on, unaware that the child's discovery might change his life forever. But in the kitchen, the revolution had already begun. Ruth's small hands smoothed the prayer book's yellowed pages like she was petting a frightened bird. The Latin words marched across the margins in her mother's careful script, promises written in ink that had outlasted the woman who penned them. "There's more," Ruth said softly. "Other notes in the back pages." Pike reached for the book, but Father stopped him with a look sharp as winter. "Let the child read. Catherine was my wife. If she left messages, I'll hear them." Ruth turned to the back cover, where more faded writing covered the inside boards. Her young voice grew solemn as she translated the Latin phrases. "A debt of blood freely given, a covenant witnessed by the law of God and man. When the crescent-bearer reaches his 25th year, let freedom be his portion and honor his inheritance." Father closed his eyes. "I remember now. Your mother made me promise to honor her family's old debts, said there were obligations that couldn't be forgotten just because they were inconvenient." "What obligations?" Eliza asked, though her heart was racing with possibilities. "There was a fire. Years before you were born, your mother's cousin Clara was trapped in a burning barn. A young slave risked his life to save her, carried her out through the flames, got burned fierce doing it." Father's voice grew distant with memory. Clara's father freed the man as reward, but the man had a son, just a baby then, and the father made a dying request that the boy be freed too when he came of age, if he bore the mark of his father's sacrifice. Pike's face had gone from grey to green. Old stories, nothing to do with present realities. "The mark was a crescent scar," Father continued, "burned into the man's wrist when he carried Clara from the fire. He bore it proud, said it proved a man's worth wasn't in his chains, but in his choices." Eliza's breath came shallow. The pieces were falling together like puzzle parts finding their true places. The baby grew up bearing the same mark, the same crescent scar. That was the covenant. The son would carry his father's courage in his very skin. And when he reached his 25th birthday, he'd claim the freedom his father died earning. Ruth looked up from the prayer book. "Isaac has that mark. The crescent moon, right here." She touched her own left wrist, "and he moves like a free man, even with chains." Pike stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. "Enough. This is nonsense and superstition. I have legal papers proving my ownership." He snatched the bill of sale from the table and waved it in the air. "Written in proper legal language. Signed and sealed by a county clerk. That's what matters in a court of law, not old wives' tales and Bible margin scribbles." But Ruth was studying Pike's document with those sharp, careful eyes. Her perfect memory was comparing what she saw now with what she'd observed before. "Mr. Pike, this seal, the wax color, it's yellow like old butter." "So? What's that matter? Clerk at the courthouse uses red wax, deep red like blood. I seen it when Papa took me to register a birth. Always red wax for official papers." Pike's face flushed. "Different clerks use different colors." "No, sir. County law says red wax only. For protection against forgeries." Ruth's voice was still innocent, but her eyes were sharp as flint. "And this writing here, the clerk's initial. It's got a little flourish that's different from the ones I seen before. Father struggled to sit up straighter. Ruth, are you saying this bill of sale might be forged? I'm saying the wax is wrong and the writing's not quite right. Like somebody copied it but didn't get it perfect. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Pike's hands trembled as he folded the document and stuffed it back in his satchel. Child doesn't know what she's talking about. Probably can't even read properly. But Eliza had seen Ruth's gift for detail too many times to doubt it now. The child remembered everything exactly as it was. If she said the seal was wrong, then it was wrong. Pike, Father said slowly, where exactly did you buy Isaac? You said the Beaumont place, but old Marcus never sold his people. Marcus is dead. His son James sold off the whole operation, had debts of his own. When did Marcus die? Pike shifted his weight. Last spring sometime. Took fever and never recovered. But Ruth was shaking her head. Mr. Marcus came to church just 3 weeks ago. I remember because he brought his granddaughter for baptism, said it was the finest day of his life. Pike's lie hung exposed between them. Father's eyes grew cold as river stones. So Marcus Beaumont is very much alive, which means he didn't sell his slaves to pay debts, which means, Father paused, letting the implications settle, which means you got Isaac some other way. Through the window, they could see Isaac still working, with the storm cleanup crew. He lifted a heavy branch and carried it to the burn pile, muscles moving smooth under his wet shirt. Maybe, Eliza said carefully, we should ask Isaac where he came from, let him tell his own story. Pike's hand dropped to his belt, where he kept the leather strap. Slaves don't tell stories, they follow orders. Free men tell stories, Ruth said quietly. And if the covenant in the prayer book is true, and if Isaac bears the crescent mark, and if he's 25 years old, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Father was looking at Pike with new eyes. How old is Isaac? Exactly. How should I know? Slaves don't celebrate birthdays. But free men do, Eliza said. Free men remember the day they were born. Outside, Isaac had finished with the branch pile. He was walking toward the house, probably to report on the storm damage repairs. His gait was steady, unhurried, a man with nothing to hide. Pike stood up, his satchel clutched tight. I'm leaving. These debts won't wait for fairy tales and false hopes. You got 3 days to sign these papers. After that, the creditors take everything. He moved toward the door, but stopped when Ruth spoke again. Mr. Pike? That ring Isaac found in the tree roots. Did you see what was carved on it? Pike's face went white as chalk. What ring? The one he pulled from the earth. Old silver ring with something etched on top. He looked at it real careful before he put it in his pocket. Before Pike could answer, Isaac's shadow fell across the kitchen door. He knocked once, polite but firm. Mr. Harrow? Storm damage is cleared. Wanted to report before I head back to quarters. Father looked at Pike, then at the prayer book in Ruth's hands, then at the door where Isaac waited. Come in, Isaac. We have some questions for you. Pike made a noise like a cornered animal. I'm leaving. This is madness. He pushed past Isaac in the doorway and stumbled toward his horse. But Eliza noticed how his eyes kept darting back toward the kitchen, as if afraid of what truths might spill out in his absence. Isaac stepped into the kitchen, bringing the smell of clean air and honest work. His clothes were damp with morning dew, his hands stained with earth and tree sap, but his eyes were clear and calm as still water. You wanted to see me, sir? Father studied Isaac's face for a long moment. Yes, wanted to ask about your family, where you came from before you arrived here. Isaac's expression didn't change. Came from the Beaumont place, sir, like the papers say. And before that? A pause. Something flickered behind Isaac's eyes, not fear, but caution. Before that's a longer story, sir. Ruth stepped forward, the prayer book still in her hands. Isaac, could you show us your wrist? The one with the scar? Isaac looked at the child with surprise, but he rolled up his sleeve without hesitation, revealing the crescent-shaped mark burned deep into his dark skin. Father's breath caught. Just like the covenant described. What covenant? Isaac asked. Ruth held up the prayer book. The one that says when the crescent-bearer reaches his 25th year, freedom shall be his portion. For the first time, Isaac's calm composure cracked. His eyes widened as he stared at the book in Ruth's small hands. Where did you find that? In Miss Catherine's things. Your mistress wrote it, years ago. A promise about freeing the son of a man who saved her cousin's life. Isaac's hand moved unconsciously to his scarred wrist. My father told me stories. About a fire and a rescue. About promises made to dying men. I thought they were just stories. What was your father's name? Father asked gently. Samuel. Samuel of the Crescent, they called him, for the mark he bore and the courage he showed. And you're his son. Yes, sir. Born bearing the same mark. Same courage, he hoped. Ruth's voice was bright with excitement. And you're 25 years old? Isaac nodded slowly. Come December, though I never celebrated birthdays proper. The kitchen fell silent except for the fire's gentle crackling. Outside, birds sang in the washed air and sunlight painted everything gold. But inside, the weight of revelation pressed down on them all like storm clouds ready to break. If Isaac was Samuel's son, and if the covenant in the prayer book was legally binding, and if he was approaching his 25th birthday, then the man they'd called slave might already be free, and Pike's forged papers wouldn't be worth the yellow wax that sealed them. Thunder rolled in the distance as truth gathered strength for the storm to come. Isaac reached into his pocket and pulled out the object Ruth had seen him find among the tree roots. In the morning light, it gleamed silver despite years of tarnish, an old signet ring with a crest carved deep into its surface, a crescent moon surrounded by 3 stars. Father's hand flew to his throat. Catherine's ring, the one that went missing when she died. Your wife's ring? Isaac turned the silver band in his palm, studying the intricate carving. I found it buried by the old oak. Roots had grown around it, like they were protecting it. Ruth moved closer, her dark eyes bright with recognition. It matches the locket, same crest, same stars. Exactly the same. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. The locket upstairs, the ring in Isaac's hand, the scar on his wrist, all bearing the same crescent symbol. Isaac, Father said carefully. That ring belonged to my wife's family, been passed down for generations. Only rightful heirs were supposed to wear it. Isaac's fingers stilled on the silver. Sir, the covenant in the prayer book, it says the crescent bearer would be free on his 25th birthday. But it says something else too. Father's voice grew hoarse. Says he'd be family, true family, not just freed property. The words hung in the kitchen, air like smoke from a dying fire. Ruth stepped closer to Isaac, her small hand touching his scarred wrist with gentle fingers. Your daddy saved Miss Catherine's cousin, made you family by blood and courage. The ring knows. That's why it was waiting for you. Isaac stared at the child, then at the ring, then at Father. I don't understand. When a man saves a life, he creates a bond stronger than law, Father explained. Your father's courage made him kin to our family, made you kin too, by inheritance. Eliza felt the world shifting beneath her feet, like sand in a storm. If Isaac was family, if the covenant made him heir to freedom and inheritance both, then everything changed. The plantation, the debts, her future. Her vow never to marry a slave. The marriage contract, she said suddenly. Pike's papers. If Isaac has family claim to the plantation. Father nodded slowly. Then the debts become his responsibility too, his choice whether to honor them or not. Through the window, they could see Pike's horse still tied to the porch rail. The overseer stood beside it, checking his saddlebags with nervous hands, but his eyes kept darting toward the kitchen door, as if he sensed the conversation inside. We need legal proof, Eliza said. The prayer book and the ring aren't enough. We need official documents. Ruth looked up from where she'd been studying the Latin text. There's more writing here. Something about witnesses and county records. She traced the faded words with her finger. Says the covenant was witnessed by the county clerk and recorded in the probate ledger. Page 47, line 12. Father's eyes widened. If it's in the official record, then it's legal binding. Isaac finished. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he held the ring. But getting to the courthouse means leaving the plantation, means risking patrol roads and questions we can't answer. Not if we go legal, Ruth said, with proper escort and business purpose. Miss Eliza could request an audience with the clerk, say she needs to verify family records for the marriage settlement. It was clever thinking from such a young mind. But Eliza could see the dangers too. Pike would try to stop us. He knows what we might find. Then we go when he's not watching, Ruth said. Early morning, before he makes his rounds. Isaac shook his head. Too risky for you, miss. If Pike finds out. He'll find out anyway, Eliza said with sudden certainty. The truth has a way of surfacing, whether we dig for it or not. Better to face it head-on than wait for it to surprise us. Father struggled to sit up straighter. There's another problem. Even if we prove the covenant, even if Isaac has legal claim to freedom, Pike still holds the marriage contract. Still has power over the plantation debts. Not if the contract is based on false information, Ruth pointed out. If Isaac's really family, if he's got inheritance rights, then Miss Eliza ain't the only heir, might change the terms considerable. The child had a gift for seeing straight to the heart of complex matters. Eliza found herself looking at Ruth with new respect. You think we should try for the courthouse? I think the truth's worth fighting for, Ruth said simply. And I think Isaac deserves to know who he really is. Outside, Pike had finished with his saddlebags. He mounted his horse and rode off toward town, his back stiff with anger and frustration. He's going to make trouble, Isaac observed. Man like that doesn't give up easy. Then we better move fast, Eliza said. How long to reach the courthouse? 2 hours by wagon, Father said. If we leave at first light. I'm not letting you travel in your condition, Eliza interrupted. You're still weak from fever. Doctor says I need to stay abed another day at least, Father admitted reluctantly. But someone needs to go. The probate records won't wait, Ruth cleared her throat. I could go, know the way to town, and I can read the Latin if need be. Absolutely not, Eliza said. A child traveling alone with Isaac would raise too many questions. She'd almost said slave, but caught herself. If the covenant was true, Isaac wasn't anyone's property. Then you'll have to go together, Father said. With Ben driving the wagon, make it look like plantation business. Isaac frowned. Miss Eliza traveling with me would cause talk, especially if Pike starts spreading stories about uprisings and improper behavior. Let people talk, Eliza said with more confidence than she felt. If you're family, then there's nothing improper about traveling together. But even as she said it, she remembered her public vow from the night before. I'll never marry a slave. The words would follow her to town like hounds on a scent. Ruth looked up from the prayer book. There's one more thing. The covenant mentions a witness seal. Says the clerk who recorded the original agreement left his mark in special wax. What kind of mark? Deep, red wax with his personal crest. And here, Ruth pointed to a margin note, says he kept a copy of the document in his private files, for safekeeping. Father's face brightened. Clerk Hollis has been at the courthouse for 30 years. If anyone would have old records, it'd be him. Then we asked to see his private files. Not ask, Isaac said quietly. Demand. If the covenant's legal, if it was properly witnessed and recorded, then it's a matter of public record. Can't be hidden just because it's inconvenient. There was steel in his voice now. Authority that came from somewhere deeper than field work and taking orders. Eliza studied his face in the morning light. Strong features, intelligent eyes, bearing that spoke of dignity earned rather than granted. If he was truly family, if the covenant made him free and equal, then her vow not to marry a slave became meaningless. Because Isaac wouldn't be a slave. The thought sent heat racing through her chest. Not shame this time, but something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. We'll need supplies for the journey, she said, forcing her voice to stay practical. Food and water. Legal documents to prove our right to examine the records. And protection, Isaac added. Roads can be dangerous for travelers carrying valuable information. Ruth looked between them, her young face serious with understanding. I should come too. My memory might be needed if the Latin gets complicated. Too dangerous, Eliza said automatically. More dangerous to leave me here, Ruth countered. If Pike comes back while you're gone, if he realizes what we found, better I be with you than trapped here alone. It was sound reasoning. Pike's anger at being thwarted would need an outlet. A child with perfect memory who'd exposed his forged documents might be an appealing target. All right, Eliza decided. We go together, all three of us. Isaac slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly, as if made for his hand. The silver gleamed against his dark skin, the crescent crest catching fire in the morning light. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow at dawn," Eliza said. "Before Pike makes his morning rounds, before anyone realizes what we're doing." Father reached for her hand. "Daughter, this is dangerous. If you're wrong about the covenant, if the records don't support Isaac's claim, then we'll face that too," Eliza said. "But Ruth's right. The truth is worth fighting for." She looked at Isaac, at the ring on his finger and the hope in his eyes. Freedom is worth fighting for. Outside, storm clouds were building again. But this time, Eliza wasn't afraid of the lightning. She was counting on it to illuminate the darkness. Night fell soft as velvet over the plantation. In the kitchen, Eliza sat beside Father's bed, watching his peaceful sleep. The fever had broken completely, leaving him weak but clear-minded. Ruth curled on her stool, the prayer book open in her lap. She'd been memorizing every Latin phrase, every margin note, preparing for whatever questions tomorrow might bring. Isaac had returned to his quarters, but not before promising to meet them at the stable before dawn. He wore the ring now openly, no longer hiding what it might mean. "Miss Eliza?" Ruth's voice was soft in the firelight. "You scared about tomorrow?" "Terrified," Eliza admitted. "But scared of staying here too?" "Scared of Pike's contract and a future built on lies." Ruth nodded solemnly. "My daddy used to say courage wasn't about not being scared. It was about doing right, even when you're scared." "Your daddy sounds like a wise man." "Yes, he'd like Isaac, I think." Both of them believed in doing what's right, even when it's hard. Through the window, lantern light flickered in the quarters where Isaac lived. Other slaves moved between the cabins, talking in low voices about the day's strange events. "They know something's changing," Ruth observed. "Can feel it in the air like storm pressure." Eliza could feel it too, the weight of truth pressing against walls built of law and custom. Tomorrow would bring either freedom or disaster, and there was no way to know which. "Ruth, if the covenant is real, if Isaac truly is family, what do you think that means?" The child considered the question seriously. "Means chains don't define a person. Means courage and kindness matter more than skin color or law papers. Means family is about love and loyalty, not just blood." Such wisdom from someone so young. Eliza found herself wondering what kind of man Ruth's father had been to raise a daughter with such clear sight. And, if it means Isaac is free, Ruth smiled. "Then your vow gets turned inside out, doesn't it? Can't marry a slave if he's not a slave to begin with." The words hit Eliza like lightning. Her public declaration, spoken in pride and anger, might become the very thing that freed her from Pike's trap. If Isaac was free, if he had family claim to the plantation, if the covenant made him heir, then everything changed. Her future, the plantation's future, the future of everyone who lived and worked on Harrowland. "Get some sleep," she told Ruth. "Tomorrow will be a long day." But as the child settled into her blankets, Eliza remained awake, watching stars appear through the kitchen window. Somewhere in those points of light lay answers to questions she was only beginning to understand. Questions about freedom and family, courage and covenant, truth and the price of speaking it aloud. Tomorrow would bring either justice or heartbreak. Tonight, she could only hope and pray that justice wore Isaac's face. Dawn came grey and quiet, with mist rising from the river like prayers made visible. Eliza, dressed in her plainest traveling clothes, brown wool that wouldn't show road dust, sturdy boots that could handle rough walking. Ruth was already awake, the prayer book wrapped carefully in oiled cloth. She'd braided her hair tight and pinned it under a clean head wrap, looking older than her 8 years. "Father's still sleeping," she reported. "Hester's watching him, says he'll be fine till we get back." Ben had the wagon ready in the stable yard, 2 good mules hitched and supplies loaded. Food for the journey, water jugs, legal documents that proved their right to examine county records. Isaac emerged from the morning mist like a ghost becoming flesh. He wore his best clothes, clean cotton shirt, wool coat without patches. The ring gleamed on his finger, no longer hidden. "Any sign of Pike?" Eliza asked. "Gone since before sunrise," Ben reported. "Rode out toward the Morton place. Won't be back till afternoon." Perfect timing. They could reach the courthouse, conduct their business, and return before Pike realized they'd been gone. Eliza climbed into the wagon bed, Ruth beside her. Isaac swung up onto the driver's bench, next to Ben, taking the reins with easy competence. "Ready, miss. Ready." The wagon rolled out of the stable yard and onto the river road. Morning mist parted around them like curtains, revealing fields still wet with dew. Birds sang in the oak trees, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell marked the early hour. It felt like riding toward destiny. The road to town wound through plantation land and small farms, past cabins where smoke rose from breakfast fires. Workers in the fields looked up as they passed, some raising hands in greeting. Isaac acknowledged each wave with a slight nod. Not subservient, not proud. Simply courteous, as one neighbor to another. "He does that," Ruth observed quietly. "Treats everyone like they matter." "What do you mean?" "Field hands, house servants, even the dogs. He sees them as people, not just things that work. That's why they follow him natural-like." Eliza watched Isaac's easy handling of the mules, his calm attention to the road ahead. There was leadership in his bearing, but without arrogance. Strength without brutality. What kind of man would he be if truly free? What kind of life might he build with his own choices and no chains to hold him back? The questions sent warmth through her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. An hour into the journey, they encountered their first challenge. A patrol of white men on horseback, led by Deputy Morton, Pike's cousin. "Morning, Miss Harrow," Morton called, reining his horse beside the wagon. "Mighty early for pleasure travel." "Courthouse business," Eliza replied, keeping her voice steady. "Family records that need checking before the marriage settlement." Morton's eyes moved to Isaac holding the reins. "That your driver?" "Don't recognize him." "New hand," Ben said quickly. "Good with horses. Got his papers?" Isaac reached into his coat and produced Pike's bill of sale. The forged document Ruth had identified by its wrong wax color and incorrect letter forms. Morton examined it briefly, then handed it back. "Seems in order. Though I'd be careful traveling with strange slaves, Miss Harrow. Been talk of runaways and troublemakers." "This man's given no trouble," Eliza said firmly. "Quite the opposite, in fact." Morton's smile was thin as winter ice. "Course, miss. Just saying roads can be dangerous, especially for young ladies carrying valuable documents." The threat hung in the air between them, but before Morton could say more, Ruth spoke up from the wagon bed. "Deputy Morton, sir. How's your mama's rheumatism? Heard it was acting up something fierce." The unexpected question threw Morton off balance. "She's much better, thank you for asking." "Glad to hear it. My daddy always said willow bark tea helped with joint pain. Mixed with a little honey for the taste." Ruth's innocent chatter about remedies and family health diffused the tension like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Morton relaxed despite himself, drawn into conversation about his mother's ailments and possible treatments. After 10 minutes of medical discussion, he waved them on their way with genuine friendliness. "Clever child," Isaac murmured as they rolled away. "Turned suspicion into sympathy with talk of someone's mama." "Ruth has a gift for reading people," Eliza agreed. "Knows just what to say to ease trouble." The rest of the journey passed without incident. They reached the courthouse just as the morning session was beginning, the square filled with farmers and merchants conducting weekly business. The courthouse itself was an imposing brick building with white columns and wide steps leading to heavy wooden doors. Inside, the floors were polished wood, and the walls lined with legal notices and county records. Clerk Hollis sat behind a high desk, his grey hair neat, and his spectacles perched on his nose. He looked up as they approached, his expression polite but cautious. "Miss Harrow, what brings you to the courthouse today?" "Family business, Mr. Hollis. Need to examine some old probate records. Family inheritance matters." Hollis glanced at Isaac and Ruth, then back at Eliza. "What kind of records?" "Manumission agreements, witness statements, documents related to family covenants and inheritance rights." The words were carefully chosen, legal language that demanded respect and cooperation. Hollis nodded slowly. "What time period are we discussing?" Ruth stepped forward, the prayer book unwrapped in her small hands. 25 years ago, sir. Agreement witnessed by the county clerk and recorded on page 47, line 12 of the probate ledger." Hollis's eyebrows rose at the child's precise information. "You seem very certain of these details." "Yes, sir. Got good memory for important things." Hollis studied Ruth's serious face, then looked at the prayer book. "May I see that document?" Ruth handed over the book with careful ceremony. Hollis opened it and began reading the Latin margin notes, his expression growing more interested with each line. "This is, most unusual, a manumission covenant sealed by blood sacrifice and witnessed by law, if authentic. Is there a way to verify authenticity?" Eliza asked. Hollis looked at Isaac, his eyes moving to the ring on the man's finger. "That's a Harrow family ring, been in their line for generations. How did you come by it?" "Found it buried on family land," Isaac replied calmly, seemed to be waiting for the right person to claim it. "And you believe you're that person?" Isaac held up his scarred wrist. The crescent mark stood out clear against his dark skin. "Born bearing the mark described in the covenant. Son of Samuel who saved Miss Catherine's cousin from fire." Hollis set down his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. "Samuel of the Crescent. I remember that case. Filed the manumission papers myself, 26 years ago. Young man then, first year as county clerk." Eliza's heart leaped. "You remember the case?" "Remember it clear as yesterday. Most unusual circumstances. Man risked his life to save a white woman, got burned fierce doing it. Her father was so grateful he freed the man and made legal provision for his descendants." Hollis stood and moved to a locked cabinet behind his desk. He withdrew a key from his vest pocket and opened the heavy doors, revealing rows of bound ledgers and document files. "If I'm right, if my memory serves, there should be copies in my private files. Documents I kept for safekeeping, in case the official records were ever challenged or lost." He pulled out a leather portfolio marked "Manumission Records, Extraordinary Cases," and set it on his desk. Inside were yellowed documents, each sealed with deep red wax. "Here," Hollis said, lifting out a folded paper. "Agreement between Thomas Harrow and his freedman Samuel regarding the future status of Samuel's male heir. Witnessed by myself and sealed with my personal mark." He unfolded the document carefully. At the bottom, clear as morning, was the imprint of an official seal in deep red wax. The crest showed a crescent moon surrounded by 3 stars, identical to the ring on Isaac's finger. Ruth's breath caught. "The wax is right, deep red, like you always use, not yellow like on Mr. Pike's paper." Hollis frowned. "What paper has yellow wax?" "Bill of sale for Isaac. Pike says he bought him legal from the Beaumont place. But the wax is wrong, and the writing's not quite right neither." "May I see this bill of sale?" Isaac produced Pike's document. Hollis examined it with growing alarm, comparing the seal and handwriting to his official standards. "This is a forgery," he said flatly. "Poor one, too. Wrong wax, wrong pen strokes, wrong clerk's initial. Whoever made this didn't know my personal marks." The words fell into the courthouse like stones into still water, sending ripples of implication in all directions. If Pike's bill of sale was forged, if Isaac had never been legally purchased, if the manumission covenant was authentic, then Isaac had been free all along, and Pike was guilty of enslaving a free man. "What do we do now?" Eliza asked, her voice barely a whisper. Hollis looked at the 3 of them, young woman, child, and the man who might be free. His expression was grave but determined. "Now we make this official, in front of witnesses, on the courthouse steps where the whole county can hear." He began gathering documents, sealing important papers with fresh red wax, preparing for a public declaration that would change everything. Outside, thunder rumbled as another storm approached, but this time, Eliza welcomed the lightning. Truth was about to break like morning over a world that desperately needed the light. The courthouse bell tolled noon as Clerk Hollis emerged from the building, his arms full of legal documents and witness ledgers. Behind him walked Eliza, Isaac, and Ruth, their faces tense with anticipation. A crowd had gathered in the square during their morning session inside. Word traveled fast in a county seat, and the news that Pike's bill of sale might be forged had drawn farmers, merchants, and townspeople like honey draws bees. Sheriff Dodd stood on the courthouse steps, his badge bright in the cloudy light. Beside him waited Preacher Elijah from the Baptist church, summoned to witness whatever declaration was about to unfold. "Folks," Sheriff Dodd called to the crowd, "county business to conduct, official business that affects us all." The murmur of conversation died to expectant silence. Even the dogs seemed to sense the importance of the moment, settling quietly on the cobblestones. Hollis spread his documents on a wooden lectern that had been carried outside for the occasion. The red wax seals gleamed like drops of blood in the grey light. 26 years ago, Hollis began, his voice carrying clearly across the square, a manumission agreement was witnessed by this office and recorded in our official ledgers. Agreement concerned the freedom of one Samuel, called Samuel of the Crescent, and provisions for his male heir. Isaac stood straight and calm, the family ring bright on his finger. Beside him, Ruth held the prayer book that had started it all. Today we have before us a question of identity and legal status. The man called Isaac, recently arrived on the Harrow plantation, claims to be that male heir described in the manumission covenant. Hollis lifted the original agreement, its red seal catching the light. The covenant states that Samuel's son, if he bears the mark of sacrifice and reaches his 25th year, shall be free and shall inherit family rights equal to bloodkin. A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd. Few had heard of manumission agreements that granted family status along with freedom. Furthermore, Hollis continued, we have discovered evidence that the bill of sale purporting to establish ownership of this man Isaac is fraudulent. Wrong seal, wrong wax, wrong clerk's mark. The words hit the crowd like lightning. Murmurs rose and fell like waves against a shore. Then hoofbeats clattered on the cobblestones. Pike rode into the square at full gallop, his face dark with rage and desperation. Behind him rode Deputy Morton and two other men, patrollers hired to maintain order among the slave population. Stop, Pike shouted, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. This is conspiracy, theft of private property. He pushed through the crowd toward the courthouse steps, his hand moving to the whip at his belt. That man, Isaac, is my legal property. I have papers proving ownership. Sheriff Dodd stepped between Pike and the lectern. Easy now, Pike. Let's see what the clerk has to say before anyone gets heated. But Pike was beyond reason. His face was flushed red, and spittle flew from his lips as he spoke. Papers can be forged. Agreements can be fabricated. You're taking the word of slaves and children over legitimate business documents. Ruth stepped forward, her small voice carrying with perfect clarity. Mr. Pike, sir, could you show us your bill of sale again, the one with the yellow wax? Pike's hand trembled as he pulled out the document. He thrust it toward Hollis with shaking fingers. There. Legal purchase from the Beaumont estate. Signed and sealed by the proper authorities. Hollis examined Pike's paper with deliberate care, then held it up beside his own red-sealed document. The difference was obvious, even from a distance. This seal is counterfeit, Hollis declared. Wrong color, wrong impression, wrong everything. Whoever made this didn't understand the legal requirements for authentic documentation. The crowd pressed closer, sensing the drama building to its climax. Among them, Eliza spotted familiar faces, neighbors who had attended her engagement supper, farmers who traded at the local market, townspeople who'd known her family for years, all watching to see how this strange tale would end. Pike's face went from red to purple. I don't care about seals and wax. I paid good money for that slave. To whom? Sheriff Dodd asked quietly. To James Beaumont. Old Marcus's son. Ruth's clear voice cut through the noise. Mr. Marcus don't have a son named James. Got 3 daughters, but no sons at all. And he's very much alive. Thank you kindly. The child's perfect memory exposed Pike's lie like sunrise burning away fog. A gasp ran through the crowd. Furthermore, Hollis continued, consulting his official records, there has been no estate sale at the Beaumont plantation. No court order, no probate proceeding, no legal transfer of property. He looked directly at Pike. Which means you acquired this man through illegal means. Possibly kidnapping, certainly fraud. Pike's hand dropped to his whip handle. I won't stand here and be accused by slaves and children. But Isaac stepped forward, and something in his bearing made Pike's hand freeze on the leather grip. My name is Isaac, son of Samuel of the Crescent, Isaac said, his voice calm and strong. I was born free, raised free, and have been free all my days until you stole me from my home and forged papers to make me property. He held up his scarred wrist for all to see. I bear the mark of my father's courage. The same mark described in the legal covenant that grants me freedom and family rights. Preacher Elijah moved closer to examine Isaac's scar. His aged eyes studied the crescent mark with careful attention. "I knew your father," the preacher said suddenly. "Samuel of the Crescent, finest man I ever met, slave or free. Carried my own grandchild from a flood when the river rose sudden. Never asked for thanks, never expected reward." He turned to address the crowd. "If this is Samuel's son, if he bears his father's mark and his father's heart, then he deserves his father's freedom." A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathered townspeople. Many remembered Samuel, remembered his courage and kindness. Pike looked around wildly, seeing support slipping away like sand through his fingers. "You can't do this. The marriage contract, the plantation debts. Everything's arranged." "Based on false pretenses," Eliza said, speaking publicly for the first time. Her voice carried clearly across the square. "If Isaac is family, if the covenant makes him heir, then the terms change completely." She looked at the man she'd sworn never to marry when she thought he was a slave. Now, standing in the courthouse square with freedom within his grasp, he looked like someone she might choose to love. "I withdraw my consent to the marriage with Mr. Pike," she announced, "based on new information about family obligations and inheritance rights." Pike's face contorted with rage. "You can't do that. We have a contract." "A contract based on fraudulent information," Sheriff Dodd pointed out. "If the foundational facts are false, the agreement becomes void." Hollis lifted his hand for attention. "There's one more matter to settle. The manumission agreement requires formal recognition and official recording. If Isaac is indeed Samuel's heir, if he's reached his 25th birthday, then his freedom must be declared publicly and sealed with proper authority." Isaac nodded. "I turn 25 come December, born in the winter of 1838, during the coldest snap anyone could remember." Ruth consulted the prayer book one final time. "Covenant says freedom comes on the 25th birthday. Don't say it has to wait for December." "Child's right," Hollis agreed. "Legal majority begins at 25. Since Isaac has reached that age, the covenant takes effect immediately." He lifted his official seal and a stick of deep red wax. "Isaac, son of Samuel of the Crescent, do you claim the freedom promised to you by legal covenant and sealed with your father's blood?" "I do claim it." "Do you accept the rights and responsibilities that come with family status in the Harrow line?" Isaac glanced at Eliza, something unspoken passing between them. "I accept them." Hollis melted the wax over a small flame and pressed his seal into the soft red pool. The crest impression was perfect. Crescent, moon, and 3 stars, matching the ring on Isaac's finger. "Then by the authority vested in this office, and in accordance with the manumission covenant witnessed 26 years ago, I declare you free." The words rang across the courthouse square like church bells. Free. After years of stolen liberty, Isaac was legally and officially free. But Pike wasn't finished. With a roar of rage, he lunged toward Isaac, his whip uncoiled and ready to strike. "I'll show you what happens to uppity slaves." Isaac caught the whip mid-swing, just as he had that morning at the plantation. But this time, he didn't release it. "I'm not a slave," he said quietly. "Haven't been a slave since the day I was born. You stole my freedom, but you never owned it." He dropped the whip at Pike's feet and stepped back, making no aggressive move. The crowd watched in tense silence. Sheriff Dodd moved between them. "Pike, you're under arrest. Kidnapping, fraud, forging legal documents. That's enough charges to keep you busy for a long while." Pike looked around the square wildly, seeking support that wasn't there. The townspeople watched him with hard eyes, disgusted by his crimes. "This isn't over," he snarled, as the sheriff's deputy moved to restrain him. "You think this changes everything, but it doesn't. Debts still exist. Laws still matter." "Laws do matter," Eliza agreed. "That's why you're going to jail." As Pike was led away in chains, the crowd began to disperse. The drama was over, justice had been served, and there were still crops to tend and businesses to run. But Eliza, Isaac, and Ruth remained on the courthouse steps, suddenly uncertain what came next. "Miss Eliza?" Ruth asked softly. "What happens now?" Eliza looked at Isaac, truly looked at him, for the first time since learning he was free. He stood tall and strong in the afternoon light, the family ring bright on his finger, dignity restored to his bearing. "Now we go home," she said, "and figure out how to run a plantation together." "Together?" Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks. If you want to, that is. The covenant makes you family, gives you inheritance rights. The plantation belongs to both of us now. Isaac studied her face with those calm, intelligent eyes. And your vow? The one about never marrying a slave? A smile tugged at Eliza's lips. Well, you're not a slave, are you? The words hung between them, full of possibility and promise. Ruth giggled, understanding exactly what was happening. Can we go home now? The child asked. Got a powerful hunger for Hester's cornbread. The wagon rolled through the evening mist, carrying them back toward the plantation. The same road they'd traveled that morning, but everything felt different now. Isaac drove with easy confidence, no longer hiding his natural authority. Ruth dozed against Eliza's shoulder, exhausted by the day's excitement. And Eliza found herself stealing glances at the man beside her, wondering what their future might hold. The plantation appeared through the mist, like a ship emerging from fog. Lantern light glowed in the windows, and smoke rose from the kitchen chimney. Home, looking just as they'd left it. But when they pulled into the stable yard, they found Father waiting on the porch. He'd risen from his sickbed despite doctor's orders, wrapped in a heavy coat and supported by old Ben. Heard the news? Father called as they climbed down from the wagon. Word travels fast when justice gets served on courthouse steps. You should be in bed, Eliza scolded, but she was smiling. Couldn't stay abed when my family was making history. Father's eyes moved to Isaac. That includes you, son. If the covenant makes you kin, then you're welcome in this house as family. Isaac's composure finally cracked. His eyes brightened with unshed tears. Thank you, sir. Been a long time since anyone called me family. Well, get used to it. Family's what we are now. They gathered on the porch as full darkness fell. Hester brought hot coffee and fresh cornbread, muttering about folks who didn't eat proper meals at proper times, but her eyes were bright with happiness. So, Father said, settling into his chair with a blanket around his knees, what's the plan? How do we run this place together? Isaac looked at Eliza. That's not my decision alone to make. Nor mine, Eliza replied. We're partners now. Equals. The word equals tasted strange and wonderful on her tongue. She'd never been equals with anyone, always either above or below in the social order, but equality felt like freedom. The debts are manageable if we work together, Isaac said thoughtfully. Good harvest this year, tobacco prices holding steady. Won't be easy, but it's possible. And the workers? Father asked. They'll need to understand the new arrangement. Most already do, Isaac said. Been treating me like family for weeks, even when I was supposed to be property. Won't take much adjustment. Ruth looked up from her cornbread. What about me? What's my place in all this? Eliza reached over and smoothed the child's hair. Your place is wherever you want it to be. You're free to choose your own path. I choose here, Ruth said without hesitation. This is my family too. The words settled over the porch like a blessing. Family, chosen and claimed and sealed by courage rather than just blood. Lightning flickered in the distance, but the storm seemed to be moving away. The air was soft and warm, filled with the scent of honeysuckle and the sound of tree frogs beginning their evening chorus. There's one more thing, Eliza said, her heart beating fast with sudden courage. About the marriage question. Isaac's cup paused halfway to his lips. What about it? Well, I did vow never to marry a slave, but that was before I understood what slavery really meant, before I understood what freedom really meant. She took a deep breath. Now that I know the difference, I think I'd like to marry a free man. If he'll have me. Isaac set down his coffee cup with careful precision. Miss Eliza, are you proposing to me? I believe I am, if that's proper. Nothing about this situation is proper by traditional standards, Isaac pointed out, but it feels right. Yes, Eliza agreed. It feels right. Ruth clapped her hands with delight. Can I help plan the wedding? I know all the good hymns, Father chuckled. Let them get engaged properly before you start planning ceremonies, child. Isaac stood up and moved to stand before Eliza's chair. In the lantern light, his face was serious but warm. Miss Eliza Harrow, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Equal partners in marriage as in everything else? Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will. He slipped the family ring from his finger and onto hers. It was too large, but Ruth quickly produced a ribbon to wrap around the band, making it fit perfectly. "Now it's sealed proper," the child declared. "Ring and ribbon, just like the covenant." They sat on the porch as the stars appeared, making plans for their future. A wedding in the spring, after the winter crops were planted. A new household charter that would treat all workers fairly. Children to carry on the family name, free from the day they were born. The storm had passed completely, leaving only gentle mist and the soft sound of water dripping from the eaves. In the distance, someone was singing, a field song about freedom and hope that drifted across the night air like a prayer made audible. Ruth's clear voice joined the distant singing, her perfect pitch weaving harmony around the melody. One by one, the others joined in until the porch rang with music. A song about chains breaking and morning coming and love triumphant over law. A song about freedom, earned through courage and sealed with truth. As the last notes faded into the night, Eliza looked around at her chosen family, her father recovering his strength, the wise child who'd seen through lies to find truth, the man who'd claimed his rightful place with quiet dignity. The man she would marry not because law or debt demanded it, but because love and choice made it right. Lantern light pooled on the porch boards as the hymn's last note trembled and stilled, and all was peace beneath the watching stars. In the morning, the world would be different, a world where freedom could be claimed by courage, where family could be chosen by love, where vows could be rewritten in the light of truth. But tonight, they were simply together, bound by something stronger than chains or contracts or the cruel mathematics of debt. Tonight, they were free.